the meadow over there, near the center somewhere, on a speck of dust atop a petal curl, lays a microscopic, infinitely minuscule world. Because of its size and where it lies, it's completely hidden from our human eyes, but nonetheless this beautiful mess exists on atop its dusty address. It has oceans and mountains, deserts hot and cold, creatures being born, beings growing old. These creatures don't mind the minuscule size, for if you saw the world from their tiny eyes, nothing would exist beyond the edge of their skies. What speck, what petal, what meadow over there, of the greater universe they're still so unaware. No one quite knows how their speck came to be. Each group has their own belief or theory, but the one thing they know is no one can agree. This world contains beauty and light, pleasure and pains, horrors and fights, explosions boom, and death fills the air while flowers bloom for those not there to see the tears shed micrometers away, all the blood bled on their world every day. Their days are still filled with wonder and joy. They find ways to build, create, and destroy as each life flows along its own tiny path, as each flame grows strong, then fades to ash. They make love and break hearts, explore science and arts, and spend their lives on that speck of dust, tend to thrive when they do what they must, which is keep it simple, which is keep it clean, focus on life and not what it means, because in the end, their whole existence is a beautiful, meaningless coincidence. They're a speck of dust on a petal curled in the meadow over there, that microscopic, infinitely minuscule world.
Right now we sit in a room.
In a university.
In the city of Maastricht.
In the province of Limburg. In the country of the Netherlands. In Western Europe.
In the Northern Hemisphere.
On this planet Earth.
In the Orion arm spiral.
Of the Milky Way galaxy.
In the local group of the Virgo cluster.
In the observable universe, which is...
Where? Maybe even on a speck of dust at the tip of a flower petal. Thank you.
A student sits in the back row in class as her teacher goes on and on about something that she wishes she would pay attention to, but cannot really muster up enough enthusiasm to do so. There are, of course, better things to be done, things that are more pressing, more valuable. Her laptop screen is open as she furiously types in her Common App details. The deadline is fast approaching. Being at the back, all the other laptop screens are in her line of vision. One person is reading on Cognity, another is editing his photographs, one person is chatting with her friend hundreds of miles away in Brazil, and the young man beside her is watching Modern Family on Netflix. Where are we? We are in an age where our generation never had to take typing lessons, never had to buy an expensive set of encyclopedias, did not have to pay for someone to regularly develop their photographs. Hell, we are in an age where photography is a career. We don't have to pay hundreds of dollars to go to different cities and have long-distance calls. We don't have to drive for hours to reach a place for renting a movie. As today's youth, we are increasingly diverse. Some are smoking marijuana, and some are dying in Syria. Some are going to college with their wives. Some are making $400 a week just in television. Some are sure that they will be blown to bits by an atom bomb. Some pray, and some don't. Some are raising the highest hours and building the fastest machines. Some want to vote the straight Republican ticket, and some want to go to the moon. Some wear blue jeans, some wear Dior gowns, and some don't have clothes to wear at all.
And how far have we come with this diversity? With these varying visions, with these varying ideals? How far have we come with our millions of voices? How far will we go with our millions of voices? Compared to the flaming youth of our fathers and mothers, has our generation taken what we've ever gotten for granted and become a small, small flame, slowly and very delicately dying out? Perhaps we're a generation that truly flames for nothing, or maybe a generation that doesn't flame at all. Perhaps we're ashes of a flaming generation, the residue of student protest, the residue of opposition to war involvements, the residue of passion, anger, and responsibility. But does that mean that where we are is not worth being? That where we're going is not worth going? Perhaps, dear DP2s, these thoughts may already have crossed your mind, because by the end of this term, you will have sent off your university applications. You will be settled, at least somehow, knowing that you've made a step in the direction of deciding your future. Or you will shudder, knowing exactly that you have taken this step. And dear DP1s, in a year from now, you will stand in this exact position, having shaped the mere thought that you're yet to establish your future. It is already a step in that direction. Are you in the process of that step, or are you able to put down both feet and retain your balance?
And retain that balance you will. Life and this world is about perpetually evolving through time. We adapt, not surrender. We are not stagnant. No matter where we get, we will get somewhere. For no matter where we are, we can't ever stay in the same place. We will always be changing, like the source that ignites fire, changes into flames, and bursts out into ashes.
And my dear generation, remember that ashes are not only residues of flames. They are source to life and nutrition to anything that grows from soil. Who knows what you will grow into? Welcome to the TOK Conference 2018.
To start off, we would like to welcome our guest speaker, Rebecca Warren.
And it's working.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca. I have a long job title. It's about education, and I work for United World College International. So today I have two caveats. Geography students in DP2, the world you're about to see and the maps you're about to see is a metaphor. Please do not repeat them in your DP exams. You will fail. Second of all, there is a terrible, terrible joke. I was umming and ahhing as to whether to do it. You will spot it. Feel free to cheer or groan. It's up to you. We will go fast through this. Welcome to Traditionalia. This is an island. On the island of Traditionalia, education and the philosophy of education responded to the pragmatic need to educate a workforce. The compass of knowledge in Traditionalia points to the west and points to the north only. The characteristics of education in Traditionalia are as follows. Learning is linear, predictable, and sequential. Students are banded in age bands. Classrooms have rows of chairs and tables. Systems are based on rewards and punishments, points and detentions. It is results-driven, it is egocentric, it is hierarchical, and it is knowledge-based. Everything is enclosed in a timetable. Of course, there is a continuum of what these systems might be like, but grey is still grey. This is Edutopia. Welcome to the island of Edutopia. In Edutopia, the knowledge compass has gone through extensive process of cognitive justice, and the compass points to all directions of the world, gaining knowledge from all different knowledge systems, including indigenous knowledge systems. It does not prioritize one kind of knowledge above another. The characteristics of Edutopia are such. Student agency is a key part of it. It puts genuine student well-being at the heart of all the education. Mastery is what is important. It is a community of learners, and it is community-based learning. It's metacognitive. You learn how to learn. There are a variety of different types of demonstrations of learning, and those varieties of demonstrations depend on what you are learning and what you are supposed to therefore be demonstrating how you learn. It is ecocentric, it takes part of the whole system, and it is personalised and individualised. On Edutopia, there is no such thing as one size fits all. There have been historical relationships between these two islands. For example, the early pioneers on the good ship Kurt Hahn went to and from the islands, searching for the quest for knowledge, taking bits and ideas back between the two different islands, seeing what they could find, seeing how they could impact each other. Later on, and Vinny, where are you? Who's this?
Oh, Paulo Freire.
Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire, Education as Freedom. Some of the pioneers decided to camp out permanently in Edutopia. They liked it there, they had experiments, they researched, and they sent back books back to Traditionalia, trying to inform them of some different ways and some different ideas about how education could be. PhD students often went backpacking to Edutopia. They liked it there, they did their research there, they got very excited by the ideas that they found there. However, they had to return to Traditionalia, and often they found that it was Traditionalia that paid the wages, and occasionally they got assimilated back into their old habits. And last but not least, teachers love to go on holiday to Edutopia. They go to a conference, they go somewhere and get some cool ideas, they visit an innovative school and they see what's out there. But often, well, they do return, they often return with some pretty groovy souvenirs, but that doesn't quite shake the system. And of course, they think, as you do when you're on holiday, could I go and live there? Could I go and live in Edutopia? But what about, and those are some really big buts for those teachers, and I cannot lie. I told you it was bad, I told you it was bad. Relationships are a little bit different between Traditionalia and Edutopia. The measurements of success on both islands are very different. Traditionalia is measuring by X, Edutopia is measuring by Y. So at the very least, this causes confusion. People think they are speaking the same language, but the paradigms are different. So when they say school, when they say learning, they don't necessarily mean the same thing. And if they measure each other by their own criteria of success, each other fails at what they are trying to do, which means they can point fingers and say, that is no good, that is no good. But it's because they're measuring different things largely. At worst, it causes fear. And as we know, and you're going to have to think of Ludovic's speech last year, to come back to this one. If you are fearful, and teachers generally are from both places because they want the best for students. So fear often breeds a worry, often that therefore means that you start talking in your own echo chamber with the people that share the same kind of views as you. It then means that potentially either emotionally or physically you start building walls and barriers. And if the argument between the two islands gets too polarised, what happens when you have a polarised argument? It always comes back to Hitler. So, we have issues with the polarisation of the debate. In the current idea of Edutopia, and you guys are intelligent, you know that utopia does not exist, but they are saying, here is the light. They're also doing a little bit of a celebration more recently, that kind of I told you so dance. And I'll tell you why. Neuroscience is starting to catch up with some of the ideas in Edutopia. Now you can actually do brain scans and you can do longitudinal studies. So therefore, if you actually know that some of the practices in Traditionalia are actually causing long-term cognitive and mental health damages to students, then you have not just an opportunity to change, you have the moral imperative to change education systems. So, there are lots of researchers who are individuals who do lots of different conversations about this. So these are the folks that are offering to charter you a boat to take you from Traditionalia into Edutopia. So there are some of those ones there. Little boats are tricky. They're dangerous waters. It's a little bit choppy. People might be worried that maybe they don't have enough safety vests. Maybe students will fall out of the boat and drown. What if, what if? And when we get there, what exactly are we going to do? We're not quite sure. They're all really excited and they're saying, hey, let's go, come on, let's charter these new territories. However, there are also bigger organisations that are saying very similar things. It's just when you have a big ship and you're trying to make systems change, it takes a little bit longer. Those ships take a little bit of a while to build, to plan, etc. But a lot of them are now starting to point in the same direction. Now, the issue being, both Traditionalia and Edutopia are part of the same world. They're part of the same system, and as part of that same world, they both actually are undergoing the same and very similar kind of pressing urgencies that we have today. Climate change, the rise of artificial intelligence, the huge increase in the number of mental health issues, particularly in students in higher education, and the absolutely huge growing of inequity all around the world. Add to that, we have a market and a job market. We don't even know what jobs you guys are going to be doing. You have to invent your own jobs. They say you're not just going to have 7 jobs now, but 7 careers. So we have all of that. And one other thing, there's a little bit of shit going on now in the world. So, this is the map. We have Traditionalia, we have Edutopia. We are United World College. If we honestly take a deep, hard, interrogating look at our education, I'd like to ask you, where are we?
Well, thank you very much, Rebecca. That was a wonderful, wonderful presentation and speech. I personally would really like to live on Edutopia, but that's just me.
And what
And
their immigration policies are.
well, now we're going to go with Yuri and Karin, and would you please come up to the stage? Lucas, are you playing as well? Lucas? Lucas, okay, come on up, you're coming as well. Okay, he's joining them later.
He'll be there later.
Go Lucas!
All that I have is a river. The river is always my home. Lord, take me away, for I just cannot stay, or I'll sink in my skin and my bones. The water sustains me without even trying. The water can't drown me, I'm done with my dying. Please help me build a small boat, one that'll ride on the flow, where the river runs deep and the larger fish creep. I'm glad of what keeps me afloat. The water sustains me without even trying. The water can't drown me, I'm done with my dying. Now deeper the water I sail, and faster the current I'm in. But each night seems the stars are a song in my heart. It's a tune for the journeyman's tale. The water sustains me without even trying. The water can't drown me, I'm done with my dying. Now the land that I know is a dream, and the line on my distance grows faint. So wide is my river, the horizon I sliver. The artist has run out of flame. Where the blue of the sea meets the sky, and the big yellow sun leads me home. I'm everywhere now, the way is about to the wind of each breath by and by. The water sustains me without even trying. The water can't drown me, I'm done with my dying.
Thank you, Yuri, Karen, and Lukas. Woo! Another round of applause.
Not everybody likes likes math, but a lot of people like our next speaker. His passions include coffee, chess, and philosophical discussions. You all know who it is.
I personally like this guy for his luscious beard, but that's just me. Also for his glasses.
Hello everyone. Can you hear me? Well, I'm honored to be offered this opportunity once again to speak before you all and to share some scattered thoughts and ruminations with you. Around 2 years ago, I spoke at this conference about Calvino's Millennium Lectures on lightness within the context of the theme that year. The theme this year is, where are we? I see that a lot of the workshops queries that will take place at this conference will address several aspects and connotations of the theme to ask and assess where we stand on issues, be it politics, or education, self, etc. What I wish to offer you today is a collage of thoughts, readings, stories, and ideas to walk away with, to look up, to discuss, and perhaps ignore as the ruminations of a madman. I hope you find something in here to mull over. I don't profess to understand a lot of it and probably have no sound arguments to offer you. So please take these rambles with a pinch of salt. Now, some of my students here know the spiel, but many of you may not, that nothing in mathematics is real, has no physical reality. There are no squares, there are no circles. Yeah, they are completely figments of your imagination. These are ideal concepts that are understood through an austere discipline, which we superimpose on our world to understand the world around us. When I see a rectangular table, I superimpose the idea of a rectangle on that object to understand the table. Do unicorns exist? You probably just had a mental image of a unicorn, and just like a mathematical entity, it acquires an existence which does not necessarily corroborate with a physical one. Alexius Minon posited an ontology of non-existent things. Such entities, he says, are homeless. They are said to live in Minon's jungle. He posits three categories of the ontological status of objects. He calls them existence, subsistence, and absistence. So objects that we call real, mountains, birds, and so on, exist. Mathematical entities such as numbers, theorems, subsist. And impossible objects such as a square circle or a wooden iron absist. Though there are contexts in which there are square circles where they drift from absistence to subsistence. Well, what after all is real? It is merely a transient temporal matter which occupies space. I am a mathematician. I have grown up studying spaces. Some boring names such as vector spaces, topological spaces, and the occasional exotic ones like Treble Lizorkin spaces. As mathematicians Felix Bloch once commented to Heisenberg that a space was simply the field of linear operations, and Heisenberg looked at him straight in his face and said, "Nonsense. It's blue and birds fly through it." So when I ask myself, where are we? Well, I ask a naive question about where we are positive. I wonder about the spaces we inhabit. Such thoughts bring to mind emptiness, homes, receptacles, solitude, oblivion, timelessness, and their characteristic uselessness. There's a lovely old Zen story. So Nan-in, a Japanese master during the Meiji era, received a university professor who came to inquire about Zen. Nan-in served tea. He poured his visitor's cup full and then kept on pouring. The professor watched the overflow until he no longer could resist himself. "It is overfull, no more will go in." "Like this cup," Nan-in said, "you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you empty your cup?" Now, traditionally in India, we've had this custom. It's called the Guru Shishya Parampara. This is the relationship between a student and a teacher. And centuries ago, the custom was that you would approach a master, and the master would assess your eligibility. Now, the word for eligibility in Sanskrit is patrata, and the word patra also means a vessel. Yeah? What it meant was you also had to approach the master completely empty. You had to surrender yourself completely. Now, there's a verse from the Tao Te Ching which I love quite a lot. It's verse number 11. It says, 30 spokes share the wheel's hub. It is the center hole that makes it useful. You shape clay into a vessel, it is the space within that makes it useful. You cut doors and windows for a room, it is the holes that make it useful. Therefore, profit comes from what is there, usefulness from what is not there. And what makes a house a home? What is the nature of the space within cut doors and windows that makes it a home? Well, I recently read a lovely book called The Poetics of Space by Gaston. A very influential intellectual in his time, who gravitated from science. I believe his dissertation was in thermodynamics, and he moved to philosophy after his experiences in the First World War. They say he read 6 books a day. He authored 23 during his lifetime and influenced several generations of thinkers, Foucault being one of them. He hailed from a humble background in a family of shopkeepers and shoemakers in the idyllic countryside of, pardon my French, Champagne. He occupied the chair of history and philosophy of science at the Sorbonne. He was a beloved teacher whose elevated flights of thought, his flowing beard, and earthly accents made him something of a guru. In the book, he guides us through an actual or imagined home, its comforts and mysteries, assembled and brought into focus into a place, and at a time undefined, except by the limits of our own daydreams, longings, and memories. Those inner landscapes from which he said new worlds can be made. The philosopher evokes an idealized past, places the miniature against the immense, and guides us back into childhood. Once there, at home, he reminds us how we tend to look down the cellar stairs apprehensively, while gazing upwards towards the attic, always eager. Uncertainty is set against promise, dark against light. The house is the topography of our intimate being the repository of memory and the lodging of the soul. In many ways, simply the space in our own heads. In the book, though, in complete antithesis, he thrusts upon the reader his prejudices against urbanity and mass-produced housing. He says, in Paris, there are no houses, and the inhabitants of the big city live in superimposed boxes. These buildings have no roots, as he would recognize them, for there are no cellars in skyscrapers. Elevators do away with the heroism of stair climbing, so that there is no longer any virtue in living up near the sky. Home has become mere horizontality. The different rooms that compose living quarters jammed into one floor all lack one of the fundamental principles for distinguishing and classifying the values of intimacy. Further, there is no mediating space. Everything becomes mechanistic, and on every side, intimate living flees. This is a book I heartily recommend, and for those of you who are interested in pursuing Foucault in particular, he wrote this lovely paper in 1967 on this notion of heterotopia. And he proposes the shift from the Bachelardian notion of intimate spaces to what he calls outer spaces. These are spaces of crisis, exclusion, and illusion. He says the 19th century found its essential mythological resources in the second principle of thermodynamics, the law of entropy. The present epoch will perhaps be above all the epoch of space. We are in the epoch of simultaneity, we are in the epoch of juxtaposition, the epoch of the near future and far, of the side-by-side, of the dispersed. Curiously, he said all this, okay? When you think of the space that he's referring to, there's also contained in it a little grain about what we call cyberspace now. Yeah? Speaking of internal spaces, he says, Bachelard's immense work has taught us that we do not live in a homogeneous and empty space, but in a space thoroughly imbued with qualities and perhaps thoroughly phantasmic as well. The space of our primary perception, the space of our dreams, and that of our passions hold within themselves qualities that seem intrinsic. There is a light, ethereal, transparent space. Or again, a dark, rough, encumbered space, a space from above of summits, on the contrary, a space from below of mud. Or again, a space that can be flowing with sparkling water, or space that is fixed, congealed, like stone or crystal. Utopias, he says, are sites with no real place. They present society itself in a perfected form, or else society turned upside down. These utopias are fundamentally unreal spaces. In contrast, heterotopias are spaces that have more layers of meaning or relationships to other places than immediately meet the eye. In general, a heterotopia is a physical representation or approximation of a utopia or a parallel space, such as a prison, that contains undesirable bodies to make a real utopian space impossible. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on this any further. This is something that must be read, and I don't profess to understand a large part of Foucault's paper. But there's another analogy in his paper that I found quite striking, and you see this motive occur in works of people like Spinoza, Lacan, Deleuze, and so on. He says the mirror. He talks about a mirror. He says the mirror is after all a utopia since it is a placeless place. In the mirror I see myself, there where I am not. In an unreal virtual space that opens up behind the surface. I am over there where I am not. A sort of shadow that gives my own visibility to myself, that enables to see myself there where I am absent. Such is the utopia of the mirror. We see ourselves in mirrors at all times. Our image of ourselves is based on the entity, the other, that resides outside and beyond us. It is from that other we seek validation and form impressions about ourselves. As an educator, I have always kept this analogy very close to my heart. I have studied all my life and have wondered what the true purpose of education really is. And I do believe that education is that which bridges this gap between the self and the image. It is when you merge with the other. It is what empowers you to have the strength and courage to be who you are and not what you or someone else thinks you should be. The skills you acquire are meant to open doors, to prepare you to be brutally yourself, so you are prepared and have a better sense of how you may affect change in the work. Many students wonder why, for example, they study mathematics. Most of what you study is pretty useless. I mean, I, for one, have always been clear in my mind that it's not the mathematics that matters for my student, it is what I have to offer them through mathematics. You are educated when you have learned to recognize these spaces, to know that they exist. They are hidden, there are hidden, elusive, and essential spaces that exist, but are accessible and dominated by a select few who exercise power and perpetuate ignorance by keeping these spaces inaccessible to others while they extract dynamic and power from those spaces. Lefebvre, this is another difficult French name, speaks of this as not the politics in space, he refers to this as the politics of space. A good education empowers you to make conscious choices and makes you aware of these spaces. Education, in my mind, is not about what is there, but what we choose to do with it. And this can only thrive in the presence of humility, honesty, and trust. Just around the time she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, Iris Murdoch had to say about education. She says, education doesn't make you happy, nor does freedom. We don't become happy just because we are free, if we are, or because we have been educated, if we have. But because education may be the means by which we realize we are happy. It opens our eyes, our ears, tells us where delights are lurking, convinces us that there is only one freedom of any importance whatsoever, that of the mind, and gives us the assurance, the confidence to walk the path our mind, our educated mind offers. I would like to tell you a short story, if that's okay. It's an old story, from old Verona. Yeah? I personally like the version by Calvino very much, but I have a truncated version by John Berger. And here's how it goes. So once there was a young man who said to himself, "This story about everyone having to die, that's not for me. I'm going to find a place where nobody ever dies." And so he says goodbye to his parents and his family, and he sets off on a journey. And after several months, he meets an old man with a beard down to his chest, trundling rocks in a wheelbarrow off a mountainside. And he says to the old man, "Do you know that place where nobody ever dies?" The old man says, "Stay with me, and you won't die until I have carted away in my wheelbarrow all this mountain." "How long will that take?" "Oh, at least 100 years. "No," said the young man, "I'm going to find the place where nobody ever dies." He travels on and he meets a second old man with a beard down to his waist. This old man is on the edge of a forest that seems to go on forever and ever, and he's cutting branches off a tree. The young man says, "I'm looking for that place where nobody ever dies." "Stay with me," says the old man, "and you won't die until I've cut off the branches of every tree in the forest." "How long will it take?" "At least 200 years, he says. "No, I'm going to find that place where nobody ever dies." He meets a third old man with a beard down to his knees. And this old man is watching a duck drinking seawater from the ocean. "Do you know that place where nobody ever dies?" And the old man answers, "Stay with me and you won't die until this duck has drunk the whole ocean." "How long will it take?" "Oh, at least 300 years, and who wants to live longer than that?" The young man went on and he came to a castle. The door opened and there was an old man, with a beard, of course, reaching down to his toes. "I'm looking for that place where nobody ever dies." "You found it," replies the man. "Can I come in?" "Yes, I would be glad, very glad of company." Time passes, and one day the young man says, "I'd like to go back just for a moment. I won't stay. I just want to go back and say hello to my parents and see where I was born." The old man says, "Centuries have gone by. They're all dead. But I'd still like to go back if only to see the street where I was born." So the old man says, "All right, follow my instructions carefully. You go to the stable, you take my white horse, a horse as fast as the wind, and never get off him. If you get off that horse, you'll die." So the young man mounts the horse and rides away. After a while, he comes to the beach where the duck was drinking the sea. The seabed is now as dry as a prairie. The horse stops at a little heap of white bones, all that is left of the old man with a beard down to his knees. "How right I was not to stop here," says the young man to himself, and he goes on. And he comes to where he saw the forest. The forest is now pasture land, not a single tree is left. The young man goes on, comes to where the mountain was. The mountain is as flat as a plain. For the third time he says to himself, "How right I was not to stop here." Finally, he arrives at the town where he was born. He recognizes nothing. Everything has changed. He feels so lost, he decides to go back to the castle. One day on his return journey towards nightfall, he sees a cart drawn by an ox. The cart is piled high with old, worn-out boots and shoes. As he passes, the carter cries out, "Stop, stop, please get down. Look, a wheel of my cart stuck in the mud. I'm alone. Please help me." The young man answers back, "I'm in a hurry. I won't stop and I can't get off my horse." The carter pleads, "It will be dark in a moment. It will freeze tonight. I'm old and you're young. Please help me." So out of pity, the young man gets off his horse. Before his second foot is out of the stirrup, the carter grasps him by the arm and says, "Do you know who I am?" I am death. Look in the cart at all those boots and shoes I have worn out, chasing you. Now I have found you. Nobody ever escapes me. Now this is a story about the inexorability of time, the inevitability of death, and the desire for immortality. It's the same now as it was then. But what is particularly striking about the story is this idea of timelessness that it inspired in the past generations that grew up reading the story. Berger laments that we have lost this sense of timelessness in today's world. It simply does not exist anymore for us. So, where are we? We inhabit spaces, inner and outer, dynamic spaces, heavy and light spaces. Spaces surround us. There are spaces yet to be discovered. There are laden spaces seeking respite. There is a politics of space, but it is also where music, love, and poetry thrive. These spaces are not stagnant, but dynamic with complex interrelationships. These spaces are vast and have that characteristic timelessness. This is a plea to step back and reclaim this timelessness, to not make haste, to recognize that meaning lies on the edge of the real and the unreal, on the edge of usefulness and uselessness. A plea to place our learning in this wider perspective, to have a vision, to transcend this illusion of reality and not to give in to the illusory nature of time, to eventually dissolve, to leave behind spaces, to allow these spaces to merge, to become invisible. The ultimate teacher, after all, is one the student doesn't need anymore. It's the teacher who becomes invisible. So enjoy the conference and keep an eye out for the spaces we inhabit when you explore this year's theme. Yeah, in the words of Borges, la meta es el olvido. Yeah. The goal is oblivion. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Parag. I think the reason he told that story was because he was jealous of the guys with longer beards than him, but okay. And after all the Canadians you've seen, we're going to invite one more onto the stage. Charlotte Haida, please give it.
This one has some actual good content.
Where did my dreams go to die? I can remember being small and hopeful where anything was possible, and reason, well, reason was unimportant. Raised in an age of you can do anything, the only mountains I learned to see were the ones to be moved. Now though, my dreams, they're simpler. Quiet, less outrageous. They fit into tidy little boxes divided by age. Is this a reflection of where we have been, or is it where I am going, row upon row of boxes, cubicles, suburbs, and gravestones? But where, or more why, did my dreams die? These fragile little hopes that we cling to, both asleep and awake, where are they from? Our parents, in whom we see a reflection of dreams that never had the chance to bloom, who quietly or loudly project what they want onto us because at the end of the day, they want to push us a little bit further, a little bit more, so that we can go into the light that they wished for, or their parents wished for the success beyond what they had. Or maybe it's in the forgotten whispers of an age long past where we raised our flags half-mast to mourn the loss of autonomy and life, to understand and hear the strife felt by 100 broken hearts, but 1,000 blood-stained fields. But where are we? Still warring, are we any better? Where are
have joy in these ideas that swirl deeper and deeper? Do you get lost in what is or what could be? And if you're lost in what is or what could be, do you know where you are? Do you know where you're standing, torn between your future and your past? Are we in this middle point, or are we lost, searching for something at last? And, well, if one stands on a mountain, can you see where they've been? The hours they've put in, the blisters and bruises. And if they reach and reach and reach, never quite meeting that final point, have they succeeded? Fulfilled that dream, the first to do so, or the last? Each is important. What is real? What is an illusion? And where are we drawing that line? Where are the gallant knights? Are they in the fantasy worlds you spin to escape the day-to-day monotony, the pain, the fear? Because it's a story you will never write, but for you, it's also a security blanket to hide from the horrors of an uncaring world and an apathetic society. Where are we? I don't know. I can't really say. But all I can ask is I beg you, please dream. Dream, dream loud and long. Shout your dreams to the vast open sky so that those unmoving stars will hear your cry. There is nothing too outlandish, for outlandish got us where we are, because saying, I have a dream, changes the way that this world works. Break down those boxes, those tidy little containers that you made, but it was also a product of our society. Take that mess and embrace it. You were not made to be perfect. Perfect is this thing that society flaunts, but human is what you want. Your flaws are what make you unique, and your dreams, they help to complete this beautiful mess that is humanity, because on every rose there is a thorn. But it's up to you to know where you are, to stop and smell the flowers, but not to draw blood. Cherish your dreams. The ones that people say are too outlandish, too far out there, leave them to the wolves. Enjoy what comes. Where are you going? Where are we from? And where are we saying no? Drawing that line. Cut. Stop. Too far. You've crossed it. No more. Where did my dreams go to die? Perhaps they hadn't. They stand, waiting, frozen in glass, but ready should the time pass. To know where we are going and where we're from, look for the dreams found in everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Charlotte. And now for our final performance, that will be Bass. Let's give a round of applause while they come up. This is called, as most of you guys already know, this band is called Bass, as you can be screaming it out.
What? Oh, sorry.
Do you guys want to say your guys' names?
Yeah, I'm Boston. And that's Spence, and that's Sia.
much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Another big hand to Bass. Okay, so the evening is coming to an end, but it's not over yet. Very soon we'll have everyone leave the auditorium and go out to the lobby to get some drinks. It's 2 levels, so spread yourselves all the way up there. But before you leave, we'd just like to say on behalf of the TOK team, thank you to everyone who made this night possible. It was an amazing start to the ceremony, or to the conference. Not a great start to the ceremony, but we won't talk about that ever again. Thank you, especially Ajay, Carolee, Dasha, everyone who helped with their cars, all the volunteers who helped set up, Mac for donating the lights, and everyone who came. Thank you. So, quick note for tomorrow. We start the conference at 8 o'clock with a meditation and reflection led by Seth and I. It will be interesting. And at 9:15 we start with the ventures, which will be interesting. So please come. I don't know how to describe it. Thank you.